When I think back on all the fears when I was pregnant, all of them dismissed except for one. The only test the state mandated was genetic. Looking for that extra chromosome.
Hello and welcome to the If We Knew Then podcast. I'm Stephen Saux,
And I'm Lori Saux.
and today we're joined again by our good friend, Dr. Vaish Sarathy.
Vaish is amazing. If you have listened to her podcast and her Instagram presence, we have many conversations with Vaish in our catalog. But today, we just really wanted to have a conversation about Down syndrome and autism, and what it comes down to is having pride in our children and in the disability community, of having an unshakable pride, which is stemmed and rooted in value and worth. And when we have that, no matter who we are, when we are challenged and others try to define us, we can come through that and stand our own. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, is just having pride in our community, having pride in our children, and having pride in ourselves, and knowing our worth and our value.
Please welcome Dr. Vaish Sarathy.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good. How are you? Congratulations on your podcast is doing so well. It's awesome.
It's doing reasonably, but yeah, thank you.
But I think it's so important,
Oh, the information.
the information that you put out.
Yeah.
Like I've always loved your brain and your information that you put out, and it's always I just feel so good sharing it, because like on this journey, it's like we need to educate each other.
I was thinking about this today so much, and I was thinking about how to talk about this, is disability pride. For me, when I talk about disability pride, it's very easy for me, because I know that my son and every student that I've worked with and every student that I've not worked with has an innate intelligence that maybe society knows how to tap, but mostly society doesn't know. But their value isn't dependent on their interaction with their society. So unless we can really, really, really get into individual pride in ourselves and our kids, right? Because the reason that we don't have pride is we're waiting for validation from society on how great our kids are and how people accept them and don't accept them. And my reaction to the whole political scenario has to become very individualistic, where I'm not listening to people. I'm just showing people that, okay, I am very proud of having a child with a disability, of being in a family that embraces neurodivergence. And I'm proud of everybody else that I work with. This is how I function in the world, and I don't care what you say. So that's because there's just too much bile in the world, if that's the right word. And how can I convince somebody politically that you should be proud of your child with a disability, as if they have an argument against it? I can only do that by living a very proud life.
Thank you for those grounding words, because that's the truth. That's been the truth of this entire journey with Liam, is, that Liam has a value, and it doesn't matter that other people, it really doesn't matter that other people don't see it. I think anyone that gets to the point where they're like, you know what, it doesn't matter what other people think of me. That's a big conversation.
Huge.
That's like every self-help book, every motivational speaker is that what matters, what you feel about yourself, and not what other people think of you. That doesn't determine your value. But it's just always been so different on this journey.
Yes.
Because, and then even I see the difference, because we see Liam's value. And I think when he was denied his right to an education, and we had an educator actually tell us that was her job, and that we had a lawyer tell us nothing would change, no one would be held accountable. You know, when we heard those things, we were like, well, why? Not why do we fight this fight? Because we advocate for our son, because we just the same way we do our daughter. We advocate for change. There's just like different things that we're having to show up for. There's different changes. There's different supports. There's different conversations. But I think that was the point when we were just like, then what has this all been for? And we were completely devastated because we left that school that we had been advocating in and fighting so hard. And I think there was a moment when I realized, was I fighting for his education, or was I fighting to prove something about my son that to people who would never see it? They would
not like shake him and go, hey. You know?
And they wouldn't.
Right.
They'd be like, she's a violent, angry mom. But I never did shake anybody. In my head, maybe like, whoa. But in frustration. But it's true. And I love that you say that about, I think that's what we do need. And people are trying to rob us of our disability pride. And the greatest world will be when it will just be self-pride and self-love. And it's not marginalized into different groups that have to be reminded. Like the fact that we're having to be reminded to be proud of who we are, the fact that we're having to be reminded to be proud of our children when, you know, that like I always bring it back to the conversation of a caregiver of a neurotypical child very rarely has to be reminded to be proud of their kid. They're like given all the conversations of everybody is different and everybody's milestones are different, and, you know, just be proud of who they are and, you know, the support. But we don't get that conversation, right? We don't because we don't have a culture. The disability culture is very new, and we don't actually have a rich culture of people with disability fighting for their rights, talking about disability pride and so on. We're kind of relying on ourselves, which is a very hard situation to be in. And there's a lot of my friends who are autistic and they're on Instagram, non-speakers who are spelling to communicate like Sid. They're very open, loud, and proud in their advocacy. I do self-censor quite a bit. So I do have that voice in me a lot. And I haven't actually given it that much thought until like right now. I feel like, oh my God, can I even talk about this stuff? That's still a voice that I have.
This often happens. This is
we
one
have
of the
a lot
greatest
of those
things
moments.
of this podcast moment is these moments, because Lori and I get to sit down, even when we do the ones just ourselves. It's like we just sit down for like an hour or so and talk, and you go, whoa. When I say it out loud, and then another person hears me, and then I have to say it to them. It's like, wait, this is really real, and it's not just in my head. You know, I can actually think about it.
I think it's almost governed by fear. And I only say almost because maybe it's not governed by fear for most people. Maybe it's humility or some other thing. But like for the most part, there's that fear. Like you said, oh, should I be doing that? I think I don't want to rock the boat. And this is a part of being an advocate for disability is we've seen this a lot. Like as our you know, children get older, they will be self-advocates, whether it be speaking out or just the way they live their life. You know, they will be self-advocates. But for now, it's the parents' job, and or the caregiver's job. But it's so layered. It's not just cut and dry. Like you're going to go in because your daughter, you know, teacher was not nice and gave her a bad grade on a test, and you're going to talk to the principal. It is layered in, you know, the marginalization of individuals with disability, whether we speak it or not. It is layered by the way we received a diagnosis. It's layered with the way society treats us, with, you know, all the words that come at us. It's layered in all of that. So I've heard so many parents say, I don't want to rock the boat. But you know what? Like, sometimes we just need to flip that baby over. Like it's like if the boat rocks and it flips over, then we deal with that. Like it shouldn't just be a false buoyed system of, floating on everybody's fear to, and I'm not saying this about you, Vaish. It's just like, because we've lived the fear, like, every IEP, every instance where we go into where there's a perceived something that can be taken away from our children.
Well, you know, it kind of stems from, and I think we started this podcast 5 years ago talking about how sometimes we feel like we're this charity case, like not only IEPs, but just to voice our.
We're treated like.
Yeah, but also deep down, caregivers sometimes go like, I'm gonna just use the IEP example where, well, maybe we could do 3 hours of speech instead of 2, and you're like, oh, can you? And like almost like you're giving me something, and I'm trying like, but the society's built in a hierarchy. So when we talk about like trying to validate our son's value or whatever, and but we kind of do that in society. Like when I meet somebody, it's like very quickly you go, oh, what do you do? And you talk about, oh, I work in this industry and I work in that industry, and right away you kind of hierarchy. And so I think it trickles down to I don't know if it's human nature or society that just kind of does that, but we need to get out of we have to totally understand our value, have pride in our value. This is as everyone could take this, but the disability community, we're talking about specifically, and not to be afraid of saying, like, standing up for ourselves or like, yeah, rocking the boat or being like, I don't know what is the word cocky. I don't like, you know what I'm saying? Like you should be proud, and like just me saying cocky makes it sound like, oh, you're being yourself, but maybe you shouldn't, as much, like we just have to get past that. And I don't know if it's, like I said, built in society or human nature, but we just have to discard that and know that we can stand at who we are and be not only proud, but know that we are here equal to everyone, and to be able to talk like that. And I don't care if you're an immigrant or disabled or whatever culture or color or gender. I mean, is that how change works when you do that? Doesn't that help? I mean, like when you kind of.
I think so. And I think that, and it doesn't have to be. And when you come from that value system of disability pride, of knowing that there's nothing wrong and there's nothing to be fixed, and that there is innate intelligence in your child that you're working on, and that whether they have communication or not, that they have things to say. I think that, one doesn't necessarily have to be aggressive with systems, but you can just be quietly really confident. And I think that is definitely like being the change, right? So that's the change, is that your belief in your child is unshakable. It doesn't matter what, and schools might offer support, they might not offer support, because the truth is that systems are not in place. And even education for people with disabilities is a relatively new idea if you compare it to the history of humankind, right? And not only do we not have a culture, we don't have a specific way to we don't know how to educate our kids. We don't know how to work with our kids. And I'm talking about teachers and school systems. So if you actually really look at the big picture, the only person who really knows how to work with their children is usually the parent. So it's really important that disability pride is like a unshakable value system in them. So for me, I didn't even know who to get mad at, because like nobody knows what to do. And so I had to figure out what to do. So you don't know how to teach my child. Okay, let me figure it out. You don't know you think my child can't talk. Let me find out somebody who can teach him how to communicate using, at that point, I figured out a letterboard. So there are people kind of at the fringe of the system that I ended up seeking. It's like a spiritual journey where I was seeking this. And then it turned out that everybody who actually knew what to do were people that, even though they didn't say it out loud, were really rooted in the value of disability pride. So they weren't making statements about disability pride. They weren't like taking out like banners in the air, but like they were just living that. It was very clear the way they lived, that was what they believed in. And those are the people that I learned from, which is why if I get into that space where I get outraged, I'm living at the edge of the balance, because I'm already at the fringe of people in the Down syndrome community, because a majority of the Down syndrome community does not believe that it is possible to not have an intellectual delay. It's possible for non-speaking kids to, be able to communicate at a high level. The same is true for the autism community. So there's a whole belief system that intellectual delay is real. So I find myself living on the fringe of having multiple disabilities. There's a significant group of people who think that I'm like in La La Land, right? So if I add one more variable to my boat, I will definitely. So I'm holding myself up by like, I will not get shaken by you.
Man, there were so many great things in what you just said. I mean, I love when you were like, I didn't even know who to get mad at. And you go, oh, well, you didn't stop and just getting mad. You did the work. You can be upset about that later, but
That's my whole goal. I want to be upset about it later. I don't know when later will come, but I think I want to be. I don't have the luxury to get upset at systems right now, because even with all of these people doing what they were, there never was a system that worked for us, right? So they like, exactly, who do I get mad at?
and then you create one, and then that's going to help someone later.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes. All of those things that you described, I was like, when you don't describe those and those don't exist, then it's fixed and our value system is fixed. I think there's a disconnect on what people think creates value. And I don't think it's always reflexive of how they judge their own value.
Yes.
Like, I don't think like when you're looking at society and you're talking about a system that's judging others, first of all, the judgment and right off the belief that you're better than anyone is broken, right? And it comes from someplace else, and it comes from something else,
And it comes from people who don't have compassion, who don't have a broad worldview, and therefore whose views aren't really worth listening to that much.
right? No, absolutely. And I think, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because this is what we've sat with in every IEP, every teacher, just about, I mean, I can actually name like on all the teachers my son has had. And just remember, like in elementary school, you have like 6 per year, or like you have all those teachers. And then in middle school and everything,
right.
in middle school, you have all the 6 teachers. And, but with an IEP, you have so many individuals in their life. I could probably name 4 teachers that actually saw my son as a value, met him where he was, and decided that they would educate him and give him the supports that are, you know, in his right, you know, that we're fought for. And it is new. And I think that's, you know, we would discuss this about education, about how the system is broken. And then when we did the math, we were like, whoa, it really wasn't that long ago. And the good part is, though, is I think that now other people are on board. And, you know, when I started to talk about our film, and somebody was like, oh, I like that you did this and that you referenced, you know, like the Holocaust with the images. And I was like, that was not the Holocaust.
That wasn't the Holocaust.
That was
That's
what
right.
was done to individuals with disabilities. And they were like, what? Like people
Yeah, there's
don't,
like a
people don't know.
montage, a quick flash
From Ted Green,
montage
from Ted Green's documentary.
documentary.
But it shows like, but people don't know that history. And to find that pride in all of that is, you know, that's work, you know, that's work. And the one thing that I think could come of it is that there's more eyes on it now, you know, because that was the problem, you know, when it happened the first time, is there wasn't social media and there wasn't like broadcast television, and, you know, mothers would be met in hospitals by doctors who they trusted, and, you know, and the words were like, okay, that must be the truth. And that's when those seeds were actually planted in our community. That's when, like, so maybe this is the time when everything gets uprooted. Maybe this is the time where we can look at it and go, you know, hopefully for our community who doesn't have that pride, who's been fed all these messages and who's, you know, adopted. I mean, it's only natural to adopt. Like if someone's telling you something over and over, we've had to stop many times in our tracks and on this journey and go, what have we consumed?
Yeah, right.
What
were we accepting?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is because, like you said, like we don't have the luxury. We don't have the luxury to stop. And then, you know, you're going here and educating your child and finding the way to help them communicate, show their ability and communicate and give them pride in themselves. And then this little thing snowballs to become something, and you're like, whoa, when did that happen? You know, so it's like a constant, like living, breathing thing, this pride in disability, because it's also new. It's also not something that people go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Disability pride is a very tricky idea to wrap your head around, because I've actually had, when I post on social media about it, I have had parents saying, what is there to be proud about? And it sounds very offensive when you hear it. But it comes from a very authentic place where parents are truly believing what is there to be proud about. And in the beginning, I used to be stumped. I was like, do I block this person? Like, how can they even ask such a question? And then I realized the question was very genuine from their side, at least. And So, in order to have pride, we can't just say that you have to have disability pride, because then you have to kind of deconstruct what comes after that. You can, as human beings, we can only have pride in things that we value, and I mean, we kind of have to like really break things apart, because we're making so many assumptions that are leading to this feeling. The opposite of pride, I think, may be the word burden, because like right now the whole scenario is around that idea of disability being a burden, right? But so you for everybody, they have, for me, like when I go back, I think of like just shared moments with Sid, and right now he's like my, like he like the poetry he writes, or sometimes I'll ask him for advice, and the advice he gives me, just the warmth that's there in the family. I mean, I can keep going, but there are different things for different people. But if you are operating under the assumption that your child is incapable in some ways, or is cannot think, is not capable, no matter what their outward presentation is, unless you actually assume intelligence, even if you never see it, maybe in your lifetime you don't see it, but you still assume that it's in there inside, that pride does depend on a few leaps of faith. So you have to, I mean, it doesn't just come automatically. You can't be proud of a of something that you don't value, and of something that you think you yourself like secretly believe that is useless, right? So then you have to like work on your assumptions. There's so much inner work to be done before you get to the pride. And the problem is that people are just doing the outside layer of work. They're just saying, how dare you say this? But then maybe if you're secretly believing it yourself, then you have to like check your own assumptions.
Pride can be a trigger word for some people too, where it kind of gets the people step back. If I was to say a noun and then pride, and for other people that aren't quote unquote part of that noun, they sometimes take offense of like, whoa, what do you mean
It's exclusive, you think?
Yeah,
like that?
right, I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe.
I'm
But
going to
no,
say
no,
red.
not- no,
I'm going to say just red flag. That shows that whoever's taking offense of someone else
It's
being
on
proud of
them.
themselves, that's
Yes.
about them, and it it shows somebody.
I'm
I-
not.
to
I never
me,
thought of that.
I'm
Yeah,
not
but yeah,
agreeing
I
with
would
it.
agree, red flag as well, because
yeah,
like
because you don't think I'm equal, because
I'm
you
not
don't think I should
agreeing
have.
with it. I'm saying a
Yeah.
lot of people
No,
step
that's
back and they
no.
go, oh.
But the people who step back, they can keep walking. Like you
Or they'll go,
turn around and go.
How about this pride? And they name another noun. Fine, we can have all the noun
what do they
prides.
call that? The whataboutism or something like that?
Oh,
Yeah,
maybe,
there's
yeah.
a term
there?
for it. Like,
Yeah, I don't know.
I believe you. I absolutely believe you. No, and I think like when you were talking about like having pride and seeing value, I think with our community, within our community, and I can't speak on other marginalized groups, but I'm sure it's very active in that too, is that like society has created this narration of there not being a value, and there's a certain part of that I see all the time that parents and caregivers absorb as their own without, just thinking that, just taking it and it's about like, it's about the value. I think if you just say, it's just pride is just like that you have a value, it's just like trying to convince somebody else that has, like, hey, Vaish, you have a value, right? You have a value. Stephen, you have a value. Like you're a human, and therefore you are unique to who you are, and you have worth, and nobody can take that from you. Nobody.
yes, and maybe that's the muscle that we're like, if we're trying to find positive things in this scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. That's the muscle that we're developing, is to be very strong in our own value system, because otherwise you cannot survive. When I interviewed autistic advocates for my podcast like many years ago, I would always ask them a question at the end, is that um, you you guys have heard about the medical versus the social model of disability. Yeah, so I would ask them, which of these models, like what do you think about these models? And some of them would embrace both models. Many of them would say that the medical model is doing a disservice, and disability has to be seen through a social lens. But some of them would say that not seeing the medical lens of disability is also doing us a disservice.
Vaish, maybe you, just for the listeners, you should define those two
That's what I was going to say.
models too.
Yeah. And again, let's see if I have the language for it.
Right,
But the
right.
medical model of disability sees disability as a medical failure, as a I'm just going to use a few harsh words here, but just like as a disease, or a dysfunction, or something that's not working biochemically with you. And the social model of a disability is just that as a person with a disability, you live in a society that's not made for you. And that's why you're facing challenges, is like because you're working where the majority of so-called neurotypical people have built the society to work with them, and therefore you're on the fringes because it was never made for you. So that's the
Right.
social model of, did I get the
Yeah,
social model
that's
right?
how
Yeah.
I always saw it.
And the medical model is that you were born with a medical issue and therefore you have a disability. So which is a medical model is a fix-it model, and a social model is an inclusive, and let's make this let's bring you, it's an inclusive model, let's bring you into the, let's modify the arrangement so that you can take part.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the conversation right now that we're outraged at is very deeply rooted in the medical model, right? So it's a very deeply fix-it medical model. And in today's society, that has issues because all of this progress has been made through the social model. So, but yet I've spoken to non-speakers and spellers, which is my community. So I speak with them, and I've heard them say that, but we're still in pain, we're still struggling. So don't like, what about the medical model? Are you not going to see why I'm having so many gut issues, or why I'm feeling so dysregulated, or why my body is not in control? And so a lot of, maybe not a lot, but a certain percent, many advocates think that these models should be mixed. And that's why I said nuance, because if you now want to work with the medical model, you have to use the right language. You have to use language and intention where you're seeing their worth and helping them. Just like you would treat somebody with any other medical condition, is that you don't like any other, I don't know, just name a condition.
Right.
We're not
You
questioning
you don't
somebody's worth.
discard the
Yeah.
person, right?
Yeah, you don't like label a person because if they have diabetes or whatever. So you're not like labeling. So I'm
Well, isn't that there was the famous archaeologist that was asked the question, when did you believe civilization started? And she said, well, when I found these fossil bones of humans that obviously a broken femur, let's say, and it was healed. Like it couldn't have happened unless somebody cared for that person.
love
And,
that.
and so that's civilization starting, is that we have empathy, and we need to be more civilized. We just have to have more empathy and caring for each other. To not that someone with Down syndrome or autism is broken, like a broken bone, but that there are some people at all times need assistance and need caring and need accommodations. And when you provide those, we're civilized.
And those accommodations could be medical in nature. So
Yes.
and maybe they're medical in nature, maybe they're educational in nature, and that's where I think that we're losing the battle because people aren't using enough language and enough, like they're not taking, they don't have the patience to think about the nuances of a topic. They're just like, okay, throw out it like 100% medical jargon and make this a medical issue, as opposed to it's both. It's always both.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes.
And the one thing that I wanted to talk about in the medical model is that we don't understand how to talk about when the medical model affects the brain and the neurology. We confuse it with affecting the individual, right? I mean, it does, but that's where you have to be very careful in drawing the line. That's why I said that I don't know who to be angry at, because it's nothing like in my life, things have been like that for a while, and in your lives too, perhaps. We went to a cardiologist last year, and at the end of it, Sid was with us. It was just this regular check that, for the VSD, he doesn't have it anymore, but, you get a check when you're a certain age and all of that. So we got that, and the lady was in the room, the cardiologist, senior cardiologist. My husband and I were there, and Sid was just getting up from the bed and he was sitting. And she turned away from Sid, looked at me, and explained everything that was right and wrong using the word the boy. She said, the boy, he's right there.
Gosh.
And it was the most.
And he's how old?
He was 16. He's 17 now.
Yeah.
He was last year. He was 16. He was sitting on the table, and she didn't even know if he was speaking or non-speaking. This is the first time she had met him. Of course, it was a 1-hour EKG and all of that. And then she said, the boy has whatever, blah, blah in his heart. The boy's heart is fill in the blanks. I mean, I don't know the medical jargon. I don't remember what she said because I was too shocked by the word the boy. I didn't stand up because I was like, I'm never going to meet this lady again. is it worth like taking a stance? What I should have said was, he has a name. You can turn your face, talk to him. And she used the word the boy throughout the conversation. And that was actually like the single most personally dehumanizing experience that I have seen for Sid. I was outraged, but I didn't do anything. And when a child or an adult has a condition that is related neurologically and with the brain, we treat them that way. We confuse individuality with, but as opposed to if you had like a facial issue or like some other biochemical condition, like if the medical condition was related not to your brain and neurology, we would separate you as a person from your condition.
Yeah, that's true.
But we don't know how to do that with this.
Well, we also don't.
Can I just first say, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm really sorry. And I just want to say that as a parent, when you're in that position, you know, it's shocking and so many emotions happen at once. And I don't want parents, because I know like we've had instances where we go back and be like, I just wish I would have
Practice that speech in front of the mirror and never use it again.
Right.
And then every so often when I go, guys, I stood up, and then I feel like, yes, I don't know if it made a change, but it's like you have your voice. I feel like in those moments, we feel like it's less of a choice when it is actually a self-preservation choice. You're also in front of your son. You don't want to embarrass your son. You know, there's so many things going on at that moment. And I
I
think
don't want to embarrass her either, because I could tell that she's a nice lady. She just has been conditioned through medicine to to not see people with neurological differences as equal.
oh, that's where you differ from me. That's
I was
where
gonna say the same thing.
that's what no, because what I've learned is like it's just like at some point, and whether or not she would have changed if you said that, like that's not it, but that's what needs to change. That's what needs to change. And I would have to see if you're, but for me, I feel like, and I know it's wrong, and I know it's a judgment and a bias myself, but like you're in that position, and if that is your, like, if this is your patient, you should know how to speak to a patient. There's
plenty of quote unquote nice people that have just been in a bubble and not exposed to, let's say, people of another color, and they just think and talk about that. So you can't let them off the hook. You can't let these people off the hook.
That's true.
No, but
Yeah,
it
that's
is.
true.
There's an accountability. Like, you know what? Whatever you're doing now was perfectly okay 100 years ago, but it's 2025. It's no longer acceptable to the parent. Like, I'm the parent. Maybe society, maybe in your break room, that's how you talk. Maybe that's how you were taught in your school. But it's no. Just so you know, it was never okay. And now we have a voice. And I think the situation, those situations, they make us feel like we've had our voice taken away from us, you know, like, and then we get out and we've made it, because it's an attack. It's an emotional attack. And one thing I learned recently is emotional attacks hurt just as much as a physical attack, and they should be taken care of the same way. Just like if someone would have punched you in the face, which is what it was, you should have been pulled out of the situation. Vaish, are you okay? Do you need any first aid? What can I do for you? Those are the things that you don't get that care, but it's the same kind of injury. And for me, I always
And the last
felt,
thing you should be wondering is if the person that punched you in the face, that you didn't want to embarrass them. You know,
like
we
that's
shouldn't
not,
come from that place, but we do. We
But
do.
we do.
I'm
But
not,
I was just saying, like, and I just learned that recently because I saw it happen. And this person was like, it was treated, and the words were said, an emotional attack is just as violent as a physical attack, and it should be treated the same way. You should get the same first aid as if that person would have punched you in the face, and you should be able to pull yourself out. And not saying anything is a way of personal first aid. Like, I'm just going to get myself out of here, right? Yeah. Like, I'm just going to pull myself out of here to where I can take a breath. And that's when we look back on it, and then we ridicule ourselves, and we were like, we should have done this. We should have done that.
There's no doubt, though, that Sid was like rolling his eyes at that moment. You know, Sid was just like, oh my God, this lady.
You know, but like because he has that gift of being 17 or 16 at the time, where he's just like, idiot. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like what happens to our community and as parents or caregivers is what that feels like. I remember that to me, what it felt like, because I can't say what it felt like to you, but it's like someone took our voice, and that is so triggering as women, as like just advocates, as whatever your journey is, like that it's, and then the fact that it's okay for them to take your voice. Do you know? So all of that happens, and we do that. We kind of beat ourselves up. So I just want to say, I'm sorry. Are you okay? You know,
I am.
you know, like, do you, like, is there anything that I can do for you? And you just don't beat yourself up. Don't, because it's, you know,
I mean, I have a speech planned and all that now
Yeah,
for
right.
the next time. And any speech given with anger and aggression isn't going to land it. So that speech has to be practiced. And because I know that that's their training, so that's how they've been trained by their teachers, their whoever their role models were. And it's a bias. It's not even intentional in that moment. It's just like this bias acting out. And somebody has to break it. I didn't do it at the time, but maybe next time somebody else will break it.
Yeah.
Somebody has to say that, okay, turn around, look at him. He understands what you're talking. Use his name. That's it.
yeah,
And this whole
I have no doubt you would have said it in a kind and compassionate way.
But
Like,
if this happened again, it doesn't even mean you have to say anything. Like, but just this discussion we're having will go through our minds in that 1 millisecond of when that another thing happens at a grocery store, at another doctor's appointment, whatever it is. And then we at least, maybe we don't second guess ourselves as much after. Like that's the whole point about like even discussing these things, is that we can either form a new way of doing something, or just if we decide just, at least feel that we don't have to, that whole car ride home, I can imagine. I've done it so many times in different ways. You're going,
Yeah.
I could have been doing another thing,
but isn't it about pride in yourself though? Like an advocate pride, as a parent pride, to say like, I don't have to prove anything to you. And I think that,
That's one way to do it. But I would do it with somebody I knew. If I was going to engage with, if it was a friend or a teacher, I would definitely do it. And I think because I can't let this happen again.
yeah.
So I would do it. But if I knew, but yeah, so I didn't really care that much. But yes, I probably would make that decision again. But I also wanted to say that when I'm not seeing intention behind their mistake, right? So because the intention was not there, and maybe they're also influenced so much by the medical model and that biases that all they need to do is to hear that this can be true at the same time the person is contributing intelligent, a poet. Well, I right now know what are they? I know a PhD in neurology who's a non-speaking autistic who's doing his PhD at Caltech, and you can be or you can be a sports writer. Is that that's the thing, right?
sports
Yeah,
writer,
a sports
yeah.
analyst. I know a
Okay.
non-speaker who's a sports and autistic non-speaker is working towards being a lawyer, a sports analyst. All of these can be true, and yet you can have a medical condition. So that's a lot of this is interestingly rooted in medicine. It's because I think it's so much is rooted in that medical model and in how medicine is looking at our kids.
Well, we talk about nuances, and when we think of the medical model, and I think of this a lot, and especially, I mean, this is pertaining to Down syndrome, and this is a lot of the reason we wanted to talk to you, because we don't have the autism experience. I don't believe we do. And that when I think of the medical model of Liam, from conception, this is Liam, Down syndrome, that 21st chromosome. Like, to even have a concept of changing that changes who Liam is, changes
Yeah.
who my son is. That's how proud I can be of Down syndrome. Like, it is, there are so many things I would not have, or he would not have, if it wasn't for Down syndrome. Positive things that, or just things that, ways to look at things. I mean, just like all of our experiences, just like who I am genetically, right? There's things I do that are going to be annoying to some people, or maybe be beneficial to some people. It doesn't matter. It's just that it's who I am.
And he and Sid are a different chromosomal makeup. Who's to say that that's good or bad in any way?
Exactly.
Exactly. Like, who gets to say that? I don't understand.
Exactly.
In that particular case, in Down syndrome, everything else is an assumption, right? So when I was talking about a medical model, I'm actually primarily talking about pain and inflammation. And I'm like, when I'm working, like I'm talking about the autistic students I work with who are so actually suffering from pain, and they're feeling so dysregulated they can't take a walk for 5 minutes outside because like it's too much sensory input. Something is feeling like they're on pins and needles and they want help. So I'm talking about a very specific discomfort. With Down syndrome, even the medical model is so flawed because we're assuming that means that they can't understand, but all that means is that the way we're teaching is not the right fit for them. So the way that we that they need I'm using they, and I don't like that, but a student with Down syndrome is just that one student with Down syndrome may need a more visual or may need a more auditory. Um, Even that we don't know, because when Sid was young, everybody said, "Oh, all kids with Down syndrome are visual," and then turned out Sid was not at all visual. Like he processes information almost 90% through his ears and is uh, anyway. So if you can, I mean, we keep talking about a learning disability, and all it is, I mean, we never talk about a teaching disability, right? So, I mean, like we have a schooling and a teaching disability that's epidemic right now. So,
Wow.
we're,
Yes.
We had a teacher who decided this year not to teach him. And it was really alarming to us because it was very triggering.
if they can understand that they don't know how to teach him, it's okay to step back. But if they're putting the burden of learning on him, that's a completely different scenario.
Well, that's kind of, well, it was just like, it was actually just like, I'm not going to go into it on this episode. It was really just
it's
like,
probably traumatic.
it was very, it's a whole episode. And, but what it came down to is then they decided to give him a grade on something that like,
If you're
like a
deciding
literal-
that's not my
literally,
job, then
like,
how are you going to give them a
not
grade?
not like an assignment wasn't even like bothered because which they revealed to me how they viewed him and his ability, and I was just like again, another episode.
Right.
But I came back like there was a grade given to my son. This is not my son's grade, this is the teacher's grade. This is what the teacher gets because there was no teaching done. Because we all know there's certain subjects that if there's my experience with Liam and the reason why he has supports in his IEP is because those supports allow him to access the curriculum. But if you're just denying the supports and not teaching him, then that's a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on his ability whatsoever. I do want to say though, Vaish, that I think you have 2 years on us on this journey. And I feel like this is why we made the podcast of If We Knew Then. So hopefully in like 2 years, then I won't like the outrage will have, because I'm getting there. Like I'm getting there. Like at first, like in the NICU and the things that were said, I was like, ah, and every year I learn and every year I find this place. And what I did learn about 3 years ago is that the anger and totally valid, doesn't change a thing because then they get to choose how they view me, and then it becomes about how they view me and not actually the neglect in this case education that's happening towards my son. So I learned to like step back. I've done a really great job this year of like stepping back and using my kind words and finding the words that I want to that I think will be most beneficial to actually make the change and the tone and everything there. And that is not, I think I had to let go of some, like, it's a battle of ego there. Cause you're like, but you're wrong. But it's like, you can fight night and like for so long, it doesn't like fighting that something's wrong doesn't change it. Like you actually, I learned for me that it never changed anything to be like, see, it's wrong, be mad that it's wrong. And then like, don't let that just be all you are. Then, like you said, be the change that needs to take place. Like you're not educating my son. Give me the work. I'm going to educate my son. My son. This is not. You're just part of the path. You're a season. You're going to be gone. We're going to keep pushing forward, right? And I do hope that in 2 years that's that seed of just like staying focused on really because I have such pride of my son. Like it baffles me. That others, like, I mean, if you don't see his value, then that's such a loss to you. It's really sad to me because his value is like just, I mean, there's no denying it. There's no denying it. Like spend like 1 hour, the willingness to work, just like the strength, you know what I mean? Like all of these characteristics that are in my eyes sorely lacking in a lot of society. They're not things that have been upheld. They're not things that everybody really can say that they have. They're not things that I necessarily had when I was, 15, So, but we've learned every time that you've come on here, because you're like in the future. You're like,
I'm in the future, but I'm also, in a good way. I'm also in the fringe. So which means that, in terms of like just pure discrimination, kids like Sid are presented with lesser opportunities than even other kids within quotes, just Down syndrome. So yeah. So and you are there. That's not a thing, but I'm just saying that. And the other thing that is that I'm trying to give more grace to society right now, because I think we're in like an incredible transition where there's so many, like there's a huge influx of neurodivergent children into the educational system. And the truth is that teachers are underpaid and completely not trained. And now we have even less funding, so they're even probably going to be less, and whatever train, not that there was much training before, that people don't know what to do with it. So I think that we're not in the dark ages as such. I think the dark ages would have been the 80s and the 90s, maybe even all the time before that. We're in the where the light's just kind of filtering in, and we're the ones that are making the change, and we're saying, look, you can do this and you can do this and you don't have to put up with this. And then the actual future, maybe like 15 to 20 years, when all of this has normalized somehow, and we've come to equilibrium on, okay, now we have some idea of how to work with neurodivergent children. I think it'll be different. But you and I don't know, have the fortune or misfortune maybe of living in this zone of transition. And that's probably the hardest thing. It's even like, I don't know if the transition zones are even harder than the actual dark ages, because you have to do the work. Anyway, in dark ages, there was no choice. There was like very one thing. But here we have to do the work and fight and face low key or high key discrimination and stuff like that. So I hope that in 15 years, we'll be telling a different story, that our kids will be telling a different story.
I appreciate you and everything that you do. And for our listeners that aren't aware, you have an amazing podcast that we'll put the link to it in our show notes. What is the name of your podcast?
It's called Nonlinear Learning, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just that the path to education for children with disabilities is a little roundabout and different. It's definitely not a straight line.
What's your Instagram?
It's Dr. Vaish Sarathy. So Dr. as in doctor, Vaish, Vaish, Sarathy.
And do you do daily videos for that?
Once in a couple of days.
Yeah. I like it because whenever I get the information, it's like, it's so perfect for that day or that moment as like a reminder or a tool or whatever is in there, whatever little gold nugget. So I appreciate you putting all that information out into the world.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
We appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Same here. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Say hello to Sid for us, and he'll have to come back on again.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Oh my God.
I think that's what we were discussing.
I think he's kind of changed and grown a lot since he came in. His skills on the letterboard are also better.
Ooh.
Yeah, he has stronger opinions. You might, if you want like a controversial episode, you should call him.
Yeah. He's so great.
All right. Thank you, both of you.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
We love you, Vaish.
We love you too.
Bye-bye. Please follow us on Twitter at If We Knew Then Pod, and you can drop us a line on our Facebook page at If We Knew Then Pod, or visit our website, ifweknewthen.com, to send us an email with questions and comments. And you can join our mailing list there and get alerts of future podcast episodes. All these links will be added to this episode's show notes. Thank you again, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of If We Knew Then.